Hello, y'all. I am back again for another video, along with being back on this exercise bike. So, y'all, this video is going to be about how to handle relationships with relatives when they're either diagnosed psychopaths and sociopaths, or in some cases, they're undiagnosed. How do you navigate through that? How do you navigate through the situation along with protecting minors, elders, and other adults? Why is this even happening? Why are there psychopaths? And I did a video about this a while back on how I feel about psychopathy and what I think for some people is the cure to it. The cure to a lot of the traits of psychopathy is bettering their relationship with the Lord. A lot of times, a lot of people that have psychopathic traits, a lot of this didn't really trigger off big or go on a major level until they started using drugs or until they walked away from their relationship with the Most High. For example, any of us could have tendencies, right? So, say I have back problems, which I do. And the back problems, I may not be subjected to a lot of pain. I'm not on any pain medications or anything like that. Because to be honest, I don't feel much pain anymore from my back problems, even though I used to many years ago. So, say one of the triggers is dark sodas. Right now, I'm on this bike. I can sit. I'm not having any sciatica nerve problems or anything. But I began to start drinking dark sodas again, or a dark soda. And all of a sudden, all this nerve pain comes back in my back. That's the same thing that happens for psychopaths. They may have the trait, but drugs, the type of people they're around, walking away from their religious organizations, walking away from prayer, walking away from their relationship with the Most High in general, or the Lord, or whatever you want to call God, Allah, Father God, Yah, whatever you want to call God, just tune into this video. So, what happens is these other things that they start doing trigger the trade off and make the psychopath behave like a psychopath. And there's a lot of uncertainty, especially when it comes to someone that's very young. So, I'm going to first begin by explaining to you what helped groom me for this situation, because sometimes you could know about a situation and you never think that you'll be in the situation. You never think that you would be the mom, aunt, or grandmother in the situation. So, when I was with my ex narcissist, one of the things that bothered me and that I had a lot of empathy for my ex narcissist was his relationship with his brother. And it was his younger brother, okay? And the relationship was not a relationship at all. This particular younger brother had went no contact many, many years ago. They were full-blooded brothers also. It was not a half brother or anything like that. They had the same mother and father. So I just want to kind of get you to understand this situation. So my ex-narcissist, this brought a lot of pain in his life. And because I cared about him or loved him at that time, I never hate anybody, y'all. I ain't never had nothing nobody ever did where I felt like I couldn't get over it. So I'm not judging anyone's hate. how would somebody feel if somebody just off their whole family? I don't know how that feeling would be because that never has happened to me. So for me, I don't judge hate because it's an emotion that sometimes fits the circumstance depending on what happens to a person. However, I do think it's best if you're going to continue to live to not harbor hate because it can make you sick and it's just bad, y'all. So, my ex narcissist, his relationship with his brother, he oftentimes would confide in me about this relationship. And I'm not gonna lie, y'all. I thought that his brother was an asshole. Okay, I did. I'm like, wow. I mean, his brother was so extreme in no contact that even if they ended up at a funeral together for another relative that passed, and this literally happened, y'all. His brother was so on top of the no contact that even if they ended up at the same funeral, he would not speak to my ex narcissist. Now, I also want to point this out. I'm one of those type of people where I make a mental note of things, almost like a computer brain, like, put that information right there. And so, my ex narcissist, he was honest about some of the things that had occurred. And I would oftentimes say, well, you got to look at your brother's point of view. I could kind of see someone being very pissed off at you about that behavior. One of the things that they had got into it about my ex narcissist and his brother, they were very young and they argued about a girl. Both of them had slept with the same girl. Now, my ex narcissist does have abusive behaviors, and he had also, when he was very young, he tried to take on the career of being a pimp, if this makes sense. This was when he was very young. I think he was about 18 years old. He didn't remain a pimp for very long. He expressed that he just couldn't do women that dirty. You know, there was a particular incident with one of the so called prostitutes. Something happened where she said she didn't have his money. And he was telling me this story, right? And he had assaulted her because she claimed she didn't have his money. I guess pimps. He was from Chicago, and he want all the money. Where my money? That's the pimps. I guess that's how they do things. So he had this particular prostitute, and she claimed she didn't have his money. So he had assaulted her. I'm not going to explain how he assaulted her, but he did. It was pretty kind of a little graphic. So my ex narcissist, he explained that he just couldn't stay in that line of work because he couldn't just go that far with beating up on women. So my ex narcissist told me, he said he felt bad because when he looked back on it, he felt like maybe she was telling the truth. So when she said she didn't have his money, he claims that he assaulted her because he thought she was lying to him. So he said, this is what my ex narcissist told me. He said he felt very bad for assaulting her or hitting or kicking her or whatever, because when he looks back on it, she probably was telling the truth. So y'all know how I am. I'm pretty honest. I said, well, that ain't what you should really feel bad for. I could see you feeling bad for that, but it's something else that you need to feel bad for. And he was like, well, what's that? You know how narcissistic people are. They just don't get what the hell else they did. I said, well, if I was you, I would feel bad for the fact that you even signed up for the freaking job. I would feel bad that I thought I had the right to be somebody's freaking pimp. And he was like, oh, you saying that? Yes, I'm saying that your ass shouldn't have been a pimp in the first place. Start there. Instead of just feeling bad that you assaulted this lady, I said, because whether she had your money or not, you shouldn't have even been a pimp to be even collecting from her. Let's start there. So, of course, when I look back on these are red flags, but this is why sometimes I call this man narcissistic, not necessarily a full blown narcissist, because he did have enough empathy in him to feel bad for what he did and acknowledging she probably was telling the truth. And I believe that she probably was telling the truth. I think if she did have his money, she would have gave the money up to stop the assault. And from what he claimed, it was a brief assault. Like, it wasn't like he just kept beating her down and stuff like that. It was like quick, over with, but it sounded like there was an injury. From what he says, she survived it. However, that was something that weighed on his conscience. And he said he just got out of the pimping career. And he was raised seeing, men when he was little. He could recall even when he was 6 years old, a pimp telling him, don't give women money. So he was subjected to a lot of bad role models that were men. So in turn, that's a road he went down in his very young years. Like I said, 18 years old. And I think he said he didn't stay in the career no longer than a year or two. It's not like he went into his 20s with this. By the time he went into his 20s, he actually got married. So that marriage didn't work. The next marriage didn't work. However, this is the road he went on. So this situation kind of gave me an understanding of how it can be with brothers. Now, in turn, see, when you see something, and a lot of y'all may not realize this, a lot of times you are with narcissists or you're placed in the life of these people so you can experience something, because you never know what is going to come down your road or path. So, as far as I could recall, this was the only situation that I could think of off the top of my head where it was a situation that extreme between two brothers where one just won't talk to the other. I know another situation with a good friend of mine with his brother where his brother was somewhat in a no contact, but it wasn't so extreme to where if they seen each other on the street they wouldn't speak. So with my ex narcissist, this was an extreme situation. And I feel like siblings, if they can, should talk. I mean, should it be so bad where I walk past one of my siblings and I can't say hi? What brought our relationship to that point? What was it that we couldn't work out? So, because of my belief system and somewhat feeling that you should be somewhat friendly with your siblings, then it bothered me. However, I'm going to explain to you this. At some point, as I interacted with the ex narcissist throughout the years, I wished that I was in his brother's situation. And I began to understand why his brother don't talk to him. And even though my ex narcissist decided, not to be a pimp in his early years, he still had what you call pimpish ways. This is something that one of my good friends and a sister of mine, not a biological sister, but this is a word that she brought to my attention that I didn't create. She told me this word, and I looked at things totally different. She used to use two terms: pimpish ways and crackish ways. Like, you could not be a pimp, you could not be a crack addict, but you could have those ways and traits about you. So he had pimpish ways. I'm sorry, y'all, pimpish ways, even when he was no longer quote unquote a Chicago pimp. So in turn, as far as going back to the relationship he had with his brother wouldn't speak to him, and they had got into it over a girl. And this is what the issue was. Okay, they both had slept with the same girl when they were teenagers, around their teen years. And so my ex narcissist talked to the girl really bad, treated her basically like a hoe, borderline would have liked to have pimped her out. He had it in him even when he was a teen. However, his brother fell for the girl. So we got two brothers that sleep with the same teenage girl. My ex narcissist thought she was a piece of trash just because she was sleeping with two brothers. However, his brother that went in no contact, my ex narcissist's younger brother that was in no contact, felt like he cared about her, and he actually wanted to have a relationship with the girl. And so my ex narcissist, from what I remember him telling me, he told his brother he was stupid as fuck. Like, my ex narcissist was like, this ain't nothing but a hoe. We done both fucked her. Why the hell you falling in love with a hoe that done slept with me and you? And this is how my ex narcissist talked and felt about this situation. He was expressing to me his honest to God opinion of how he felt. However, his brother, his younger brother, fell for. So there was one situation where my ex narcissist, when him and his brother was teens, he was yelling at the girl, hollering at her, raising his voice, talking shit to her, talking down to her, talking to her pretty bad. So his younger brother that had slept with the girl too told my ex narcissist, which was his big brother, to stop talking to the girl like that. He said, man, you don't have to talk to her like that. And that was one of their first beefs or things that they conflicted about. Now, obviously, looking back on it, this younger brother that's in no contact actually is empathic, y'all. I mean, you gotta see the empathy there, right? So then they got into it about other things, but I'm not here to talk about that. I'll talk about that in another video. So this is what sent my ex-narcissist and his younger brother on a bad road with each other. And he checked them. He said, don't talk to her like that. Now, when I was with my ex-narcissist, he was kind of mean, he talks nice when he wants something, right? So I can say throughout the years, he is the type where he'll try to talk shit to you, but I'm not for that. Y'all, that's my subscribers. You already know me, okay? And if you don't know me, you're going to get to know me. I'm not the one, okay? My ex-narcissist never called me the B word or none of that. He just knew better, okay? And narcissists or narcissistic people, say he's not a full-blown narcissist, but he's just narcissistic. As they grow in age, say he continued to talk to women like that, he kind of knows who he can do it to, who he can't. Enough women done already told him they'll bring they back to his house and whoop his old ass. Narcissistic men and women, they learn their lesson, y'all. Okay? They may start out like that, talking a bunch of crazy stuff to people, but everybody's not going to tolerate it. My ex narcissist never talked crazy to me in my house or none of that, but he loved to talk a little crazy over the phone. And over the years, especially as I went in no contact, one of the things I noticed was his raising his voice like he's somebody daddy or something. So I would just correct the behavior. And at that point, I'm like his brother in a way. Like, I'm not gonna be dealing with this man. However, I'm not gonna lie, y'all. I mean, if I see the man on the street, I'll speak. I'm not as hardcore as his brother. His brother is doing the right thing for himself. And I believe now, even though I had a lot of empathy about this and I did feel sorry for my ex narcissist, it is clear to me now why my ex narcissist's younger brother is in full blown no contact. I actually understand it now and I'm in agreement with it. So, going on into my family element. And y'all, we got to stop these mentors, okay? You got to be careful about mentors because they do a lot of gaslighting. Depending on their background, a lot of them will be in the defense of a psychopath. You know, like say you say to the mentor, well, in court, they said this is an undiagnosed psychopath. And the mentor says, well, and just as a disclaimer, I'm just telling you the statement so you'll understand. Don't take this personal. However, I'm going to explain the correct way to look at this. If you're in a court of law and one of the professionals listens to the story and they tell you or they make a statement that who you are referring to is a undiagnosed psychopath, don't do this. This is the worst thing you can do. This is the worst thing you can do in defense of your life and the people's life around you. And it also will not help the psychopath. If you want to keep your psychopathic relative in the family and they're young and you want to try to continue to support and show love, the worst thing you can do is be in denial. So, first of all, let's get this straight. The so-called white man, because this is black people problem, y'all. Judging what is said by the race. So we in court, the white man say, okay, your relative is an undiagnosed psychopath. And of course, I'm a little bouncy, I defend it. Huh, you mean he's a sociopath. Actually, this is so crazy when I look back on it. When the white man, so to speak, and I gotta call him a white man because I gotta get more into why I'm calling him that and pointing that out. I normally don't point race out, but I gotta point it out in this to give you the reason I'm telling the story. So, of course, I'm like, no, I think he's a sociopath. But actually, the white man, in a way, was kind of complimenting me on some level. Because what he was saying is, he's calling him an undiagnosed psychopath. So he's basically saying that what is wrong, I didn't fully have control over. Like, it ain't nothing you did as his mom. It's just, this is the behavior, and he behaves like an undiagnosed psychopath. Undiagnosed, y'all. Okay, pay attention to that because that's what it was. It's undiagnosed. So, of course, I'm like, he's a sociopath, which is something that I called him myself. And actually, see, I don't believe in talking behind nobody's back. This particular relative asked me, what did I think he was? And I told him the honest to God truth. He said, what am I? I said, I think you're a sociopath. And I think you need to get into some therapy and this, and that. And my relative did not argue or debate with me. I explained what I looked up online and what I studied on. This relative know that I'm pretty savvy on narcissists, and I have an understanding and I've studied. And so there was no really debate there. However, with the so-called white man, what America calls the white man, there was this mentor that wanted to come in my other relative's life, the younger relative. And she was a female, and she had had some history with being incarcerated, and she went into defense of my other relative being called a psychopath because she said white men always want to put a stigma on black males. Now, when she said that, I was done, and I'm going to tell you why. Because that's not the best information to keep my family alive and to keep everybody safe. That's why so many dead black people. Because the first thing we want to say, let me tell you this, okay? White men, their ancestors were slave owners. What do you freaking think them slave owners were? Those were psychopaths. So this is how I look at this mess. If a white man tell me it's a psychopath, then it might be a damn psychopath. Because it ain't nobody in America that know more about a psychopath and the origins of psychopathy other than a damn white man. And the second would be black men. Because black men were drawn into all of this through being victims of slavery. Okay? Does this make sense? So it is a backwards way of thinking to think, well, because he white, he's stigmatizing my relative. That's not how that works. He's not stigmatizing my relative. He just don't want nobody to end up in a body bag, and his job in that courtroom is to explain to you and tell you the truth of what that freaking behavior is. Like I said, before I even went to court, I thought he was a sociopath, and I had already told my relative that's what he is, or that's what my opinion is. Keep in mind, I can't diagnose nobody, but I've been around enough sociopaths, psychopaths, and narcissistic people in my damn life to understand what that is. So I was not getting ready to let this so-called black mentor gaslight me into thinking that that was a racial attack. It had nothing to do with race, because the fact of the matter is white men and black men and any race of man can be a freaking psychopath. And that was another wake-up call for me. The white man wasn't telling a fucking lie. And as I go into the situation, it's been over a year, and I'm still dealing with the freaking psychopathy. What do you call this? Okay. 2 of my other relatives over the weekend, Saturday, get robbed. Okay. Actually robbed, y'all. Another little psychopath teenager tells a group of guys to jump out of a freaking car and rob 2 of my relatives. This was Saturday, y'all, last Saturday. And they were so trifling, y'all, stole their drinks. How many people rob you drinks? Coffee and water and lemonade. How many people do that? But this is what happened. So that happened Saturday. I had a call with the psychopath Sunday morning and just happened to mention about the robbery, given some of the information. Guess what the psychopath says, y'all? Or this undiagnosed psychopath. He says, oh yeah, about an hour before, no, he gives the time. He says around 6 p.m. Saturday, some guys and people rolled up in a black SUV with tinted windows asking, where is my relative at? Talking about his relative, because these are my blood relatives too. So he's asking him, well, where is his relative? And so I'm listening. And so I asked the undiagnosed psychopath, I said, wow, why would some guys and a girl that's in the back, the one that's basically telling these guys that's with her to do these robberies, that's what this teenage girl does. She has psychopathy, I believe. I believe she may be diagnosed. I suspect that, or she's diagnosed with something. And she gets these guys, she's a predator. She gets these guys, sometimes her age, younger or older, and she has them doing these robberies and drug deals and things like that. So I asked this undiagnosed psychopath relative of mine, I said, wow, that happened at 6 p.m. Saturday. The robbery happened between 7 and 7:30 p.m. Why would somebody, this was my question, I said, well, why would somebody feel so comfortable to ask you where your relative at? And this is what the undiagnosed psychopath said, y'all. He said, because they know I don't like him. Now, let's start there. These criminals know that this undiagnosed psychopath does not like the other relative. But this so-called other relative that he don't like, this relative would wake me up or make sure we went out, even if it was past midnight, y'all, to go out and look for my psychopathic relative to make sure he was still freaking alive. You hear me? Listen to me very carefully. This relative that he claimed he don't like would get me up on my most pissed off days and say, let's go look for this particular person. And if you listen to this video, you know who the hell you are. But that's what your brother used to do. Your little brother used to get up with the most saddest look in his eyes and say, let's go find my brother. And I would go. We would take our hammer, knife, or whatever we had, the best we had to defend ourselves out there at night, and we would walk through the neighborhood, go to the park, go to the school to make sure that this particular relative that was making a choice to live out on the street and do drugs, we would make sure that he was still alive. And a lot of times who was leading this was the relative that the psychopath claimed he don't like. Are y'all getting this? So, where do you go from here? Where do you go from here? Because this gets risky. So finally, the psychopath, he took this relative out to the streets, helping him be a runaway, helping him smoke weed, vape, or whatever, just helping destroy this particular relative. So he finally says, okay, I don't like him. But has no legitimate reason not to really like him in the full sense of the word. So what do? How do you navigate through the psychopathy? This is what you do. You don't do it like a narcissist, and you don't do it like a psychopath. But I'm going to tell you something. Never fully be on the side of the psychopath. And this is why. You do not want to enable this behavior. What is the right thing to do? That particular mentor I told you, when she was like, the white man in court is just saying that particular relative that was brought up, his name was brought up in court. We were not in court about him. He was not being charged. This particular psychopathic relative was running around doing whatever he wanted to do and getting away with it, while the other relative ended up in the court situation, y'all. We went to another proceeding for this particular relative. And it's funny because while this particular relative runs around getting in mess and chaos, even though he's trying to get his life back together, the undiagnosed psychopath, he is steadily putting his relatives in situations where we're going to court for his bullshit. He's running around living the chaotic life, but me and the other relative that would go out and look for him at night, that was showing this love, we end up in freaking court. Me and the other relative. Isn't that ironic? We ain't running around. We at home. We not running the streets. But we end up in court for his shit. So we're standing in front of judges saying, we don't have nothing to do with this. The stuff gets dismissed. I mean, we have a record of what we do and a trail of what we do that is protecting us, y'all, and our best interests. And I'm just going to say this to you now, y'all. There will be a part 2. There's going to have to be a part 2. So after this video ends, go to part 2 of this video. I don't know what I'm going to name this yet, but just go to part 2. Both will be there. I will have both uploaded. So going back to this particular mentor too, I didn't choose that mentor for my younger relative because of the simple fact she not gonna get all of us messed up defending this bullshit and going against what the professional is advising. If a white man stand up in court and tell you this is an undiagnosed psychopath, you might want to listen. I think he know a lot about psychopathy, right? He just does. So I didn't let this black mentor gaslight me. And the same mentor, y'all, had the audacity. Let me tell you how sick this mentor was. She was a borderline psychopath herself. I chose not to take her services. Didn't want her services. I didn't need that help for my relative that was a minor. This crazy ass lady went up to my relative's school randomly without my freaking permission. Walked up in the school and came to pick him up. Crazy, huh? Now, pick up on that point. Maybe she defending the psychopath because remember, I told you she had been incarcerated herself. And I'm not talking about jail. I'm talking about in and out of prisons. She had did about, I think, 16 years in prison for an attempted murder and other things. And I'm glad she tried her best to clean her life up. But see, she sure was in defense of this psychopath stuff. And remember, a lot of them are diagnosed in prison, y'all. Because she was more in defense of the psychopath instead of being more in defense of the minor that was not the psychopath. Because in this court proceeding, the minor that was actually in the mess was not considered an undiagnosed psychopath. It was actually the relative that was not in court, y'all. So you gotta tune in for part 2. It's gonna get really, really interesting as I go more into this story and this family situation. and into the conversation with the psychopath. Please go to part 2, y'all. Go to part 2 right now. Please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment. Thank you. Bye.